Okay, so today we're going to interview Dr. Anita Vangelisti, who's Associate Dean at the University of Texas at Austin with a specific focus in relational communication. Dr. Vangelisti, are you ready to begin?
I'm ready.
All right. So the first question. So what drew you to want to study and get a PhD in communication studies?
So that's a little bit of a long story, and I'll make it short. It's also a little random. And I think when you talk to people, many of us sort of have stories about how we got here that are a little random and wandering. So the way I paid for my undergraduate education was that I taught what at that time were called personal development courses. Those personal development courses, I guess you could sort of say they're kind of like etiquette courses. We taught people how to walk, some stuff about how to speak, for women, how to put on makeup. I mean, it was, how to be, and it was mostly for adolescents. So sort of how to be a grown-up person in society courses. And what I found during those courses was that the most impactful part of them was the part that talked about communication. So my idea at that time was I did this as sort of an independent contractor. I did it at a few fashion colleges around town. And again, was paying for my undergraduate education at that time. I was going to get a master's degree in communication because that really was the part that really influenced my students the most and developed my own business. Once I got into the master's program at the University of Washington, I just sort of fell in love with teaching at the university level. They asked me to teach classes there and also fell in love with research. And so that's how I kind of stumbled into the process.
So how do you think the field has changed since you started?
I'm going to say the overarching change is that it's matured a lot. So research is more simultaneously, it's more theoretically based. When I first started, there were definitely theoretically based articles being published. There were many theoretically based articles being published, but now it's much more of a front and center piece of your research when you publish to have a theory that you're, if not testing, exploring and expanding. Our research is much more sophisticated methodologically than it was. I think it's fair to say our researchers in our field are at the cutting edge of, statistical analyses, different methods of collecting data. We have people collecting physiological data, for example. And then I think the other thing that's fun is that while both of those things are going on, our field is more applied than it used to be when I first started. So we have people doing research on health. We have people doing research on social media in very applied ways that translate into stuff that community people can use and digest and apply in their everyday life.
So how do you think that you've contributed to all those changes over the years in the communication field?
I have tried to push two things. One is focus on, I'm going to be sort of colloquial here and say cool ideas that research projects and ideas that are interesting to larger communities than just the academy. So I like to do things that are applied simultaneously and with being sort of conceptually deep and contributing to a research literature. The other thing that I think is fair to say I've made some contributions to is doing interdisciplinary research. I've spent a lot of time, my service time throughout my career, forging ties with people in other fields. And you can see that in the research I've published and books I've published, because I think we're stronger when we work with others. And it's also a super fun way to learn different perspectives.
How would you describe your own kind of research interests, things like that?
Generally, my research is on emotion in the context of personal relationships. More specifically, my lines of research focus on hurtful communication and responses to hurtful communication. That has more recently evolved into being termed by other researchers as social pain. And the other line of research I have is on secrecy, and sort of both secrecy and disclosure. So I'm interested in both of those things, the way people enact them, the way people explain them, and how they feel about them.
Interesting, interesting. And so what is your approach to research and the methodology you use in your research?
So I really think I straddle the fence there. Don't embrace quantitative or qualitative, kind of do both. Like to work with a lot of open-ended data. And part of the reason for that is I can say one thing that does characterize most of my work is that I preference the perspective of participant over the researcher's perspective. And so that really came from the background in ethnography.
So what about those research topics what made it particularly interesting for you to explore those topics?
Conceptually, the thing that interests me about both of those topics is I see them as core both to individuals' identities and to relationship identities.
Okay.
And what I mean by that, both hurtful communication, how you experience it, how you deal with it, how you explain it, and secrecy, how you define it, your perspective on what's a good secret versus a bad secret, how it affects your relationship. Both of those things are really sort of gut issues that influence the way people do their relationships and the way they identify themselves.
Based upon that, so kind of what scholarship in the communication field influenced you the most to kind of investigate what you investigate?
The work that influenced me very first was actually done by a professor at the University of Washington named John Stewart. And the thing about his work that influenced me was that he talked about relationships as being the thing that happened between people. So he has a book called Bridges Not Walls, for example, which is an undergraduate textbook mostly. But he was the first person that I really heard speak about and write about relationships, not as two individuals who got together and tried to work things out together, but as something that was co-created together, that was almost separate from them. Sort of the relationship as an entity of it as its own.
Can you identify your most favorite moment in the classroom?
Some of the best moments in the classroom are when you can see on students' faces when something clicks for them. So you're going on and giving examples, and then all of a sudden you look out and see something click for a student. And you can literally see the light bulb light. Those are favorite moments. I remember one example specifically when this was actually in a graduate course, and I was talking about research on secrecy and disclosure. And one of the graduate students just got this funny look on their face and said something like, they just at that moment realized that something in their family was a secret that people had been keeping a long time, and it all fell together for them. And then they went, oh, now I see why this topic is treated, as a taboo topic in my family. And they ended up doing a lot of research on secrecy and disclosure after that, because things just fell together for them. That was a fun and special moment.
What is something that you're just especially proud of your career thus far?
Oh gosh. I think I have to say the thing I'm most proud of is my students.
Okay.
Really. I mean, it's sort of like the example I gave of when you're talking and you see the light bulb go on.
Yeah.
With one of your undergrads in the classroom. My graduate students really, I even hate to call them my graduate students I have had the privilege to work with, make me the most proud, because I see them go out in the world and it's like there they go, and they're doing amazing work and teaching people important things. And that's just a privilege to be able to watch.
Where have you seen some of your students, both at an undergraduate level and graduate level, what they do after they finish their bachelor's degree or finish their master's degree?
I am in touch with more graduate students than undergraduate students. The undergraduate students tend to fly away and do their lives, and sometimes they come back and say hi, but not as much. But the undergraduate students I have been in touch with have done everything from, the ones that come back have been, some of them have been attorneys. A lot of them have gone into sort of sales. You can think of a couple that have started their own businesses, and a couple also like in social work jobs. Those are probably the primarily ones I'm into. Oh, I can think of, there's another person, there's one person who I may get to see over the holiday break who's actually working in the White House now. I think he might be chief financial officer or something. So government positions as well. Now that I'm saying him, I'm thinking of another one too. So really, undergraduate level, a wide variety of careers.
Where do you see the field of communication going moving forward?
I think, given how the field has matured since I got in it, that it is going to, and I hope it is going to, continue to get both more diverse in terms of theories and methods and approaches to research, and at the same time that it's more diverse, also that it gets more open to those different theories, methods, etc. There's still, when I was first starting out, there are still those arguments. I can't say those arguments aren't there anymore. But for example, when I was a master's student, there were big arguments that would happen at conferences between people who do qualitative research and people who do quantitative research. There are still some people who argue about that, but most people now say, what's your question? What's your theory? And then what's the tool that's most appropriate for that question and theory? So there aren't really methods wars as much as there used to be. I hope that we get more that way about all the different things. I hope that we get that way more about theory and methods, topic areas, so that we're in a way more confident of going forward in the work that we do and that we teach.
Interesting. That's a great way to end it. Well, Dr. Vangelisti, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your day today. We know you're very busy to come and meet with us. So thank you so much for everything that you've done for the field and for participating in this interview.
Thank you for having me. It's really an honor. And I hope you all have a great year.